now it's over. But Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. And hey, one of the questions we opened the show with today, Mark, is looking at the Seahawks team that unfortunately is not going to the playoffs, but they did improve their record from last year from 9 wins to 10 wins. When you look at it and say, all right, this team won 10 games, would you look at it and go, success? Or is it playoffs or bust? Anything short of a playoff is a failure? How do you view it, a team that was a 9-win team last year doing what they did this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's always different. I think like in Denver for me, like I was looking at, hey man, all I really wanted to know was, is Bo Nix the quarterback of the future? And I think we solved that equation, right? So anything over that is gravy. Depends on what your expectations are coming into the year. And if you expected to be a playoff team, well, then it's a disappointment, even though you increased your win total by 1 and you won 10 games and all that stuff. In a day and age, like for me, that you look at the NFC West and you look at San Francisco having a really down year, Arizona, stumbling toward the end of the season and losing a bunch of games. Like this was a year to compete for that division, and even though you were right there at the end of the year with the Rams, both of you at 10-7, ultimately you didn't get that done. So I would say in a year where you could win that division, it feels like a disappointment.
Well, we were talking about double-digit wins, and like half the league is double-digit wins, so maybe that's not such a big deal. But the one thing is, look at first-year coaches that had double-digit wins, and it's the Commanders, of course, and then you got the Chargers, and both Dan Quinn and Jim Harbaugh have coached before, but you got a first-time coach in Seattle. Do you think that gives him a little bit extra kind of pop there for having accomplished that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big that part is a big time accomplishment, and obviously you did a great job, and you have already made some moves about getting ready your offensive coordinator, correct? So
yep.
That's one of the things you got to figure out. So I think McDonald's done a really good job. I mean, it's and defensively, I think we've talked about this over the course of time. The improvements they made on the defensive side of the ball, they moved players out, right? They got rid of players, brought new players in, and so I think it was a big time performance on that side of the ball. And ultimately, football is such a complementary game. You've got to have that other side of the ball produce as well. So, yeah, I think it shows really bright for the future what he's got going on and the way he coaches his football team and the performance. But ultimately, I mean, you know how it is in this league, Dave. You want to win, you want to go to the playoffs, and especially in a year when San Francisco's down. And they are considered the number one team in that division with the most talent, probably. You'd like to be the one that comes out of that division with the win, with the division title.
What are your feelings about Geno Smith? He's the questions are out there about, all right, is he coming back? He's under contract for next year. His cap hit, I'm looking at Spotrac, and his cap hit says $44.5 million. So you would imagine if they're going to keep him, they're going to extend him, spread that money out. Albert Breer said that he and his people are expecting a commitment from the Seahawks in the offseason. He made a comment in his post-game presser this weekend about, hey, I think this team's headed in the right direction with or without me. So there seems to be some questions to whether he comes back or not. I don't know who would occupy that spot if he leaves, but what would you do if we put you in that GM spot? What would you do with Geno? Would you sign him to an extension, or would you hold him to his 1 year and see how it plays out? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't know what the extension would look like. How long you would have to have that extension. I would probably be more apt to make him play on a 1 year deal. But the issue that you get into is this is not a quarterback-driven league. It's a quarterback-deprived league. There's just not very many guys that can play, and I know everybody thinks that every guy coming out of college can play, and we've seen kind of a crazy year in which Bo Nix had a lot of success. Jaden Daniels had an unbelievable success. It looked like Drake May, could become a really good starting quarterback in this league. But that's the outlier, man. Most of these guys, they get drafted in the National Football League. Most of these guys fail miserably. And so, I look at it like, I mean, how many guys out there, are going to come in and you know, and flip the franchise and do what Jaden Daniels did. It just doesn't happen. And it's not like, you know, it's not like there's a ton of those guys out there in free agency that, you know, that all of a sudden figure it out and become Sam Darnold. It just doesn't happen that often. So I think you're in a pretty good spot. And then it's just a matter of, you know, what does Geno Smith want? How much does he want? How much is he willing to take? Can you cut a good deal? If you can't, you make him play on the last year.
Hey, Mark, I'm wondering how much complaining offensive linemen do about running backs, and I feel like you've earned your complaining because, you know, offensive line, it's just a miserable position to play. You only get called out if you give up a sack or have a penalty or something like that. But we were talking about Ken Walker, and just, you know, that I was with him. I was kind of like, hey, just take the 2-3 yards. And then the next year I was like, you know what? He's got good ideas. He can, you know, cut it back or whatever. I'm kind of back to, hey, just pick up the 4 yards with him or 3 yards or whatever. Was that ever something, first of all, what you see out of K9, and then just how much did offensive linemen complain about that? Like, come on, dude, just put your head down, get behind your pads, and pick up the 4 yards.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I play with TD, and TD was that way. You know, when it comes to the running back position, every meal can't be a smorgasbord, right? Every meal can't be a banquet. Every now and again, you need to understand what being a +2 runner is. If we block it for 2, you get us 4. And those are the things, like when you're trying to break every run, that just doesn't work. Yeah. You have got to wear down a defense. You have got to get me that nasty 4 on a consistent basis. And if you do that, eventually you'll get guys overplaying it. You'll get guys kind of running around blocks. You'll get guys that don't want to necessarily put their nose in there. And that's when the big breakouts happen. But the big breakouts don't happen because you're trying to make them happen. They just happen because you wear out a defense, and guys get out of their gap assignment, and guys, you know how that is. Guys are tired. They don't make it. They, like I said, circle a block or try to run underneath the block, and the next thing you know, you've got a house call. So yeah, it's a problem. Like, those are things that really drive you crazy. And until you start having a coaching staff and running backs that understand the value of nasty 2 and 3 and 4 yard gains and what the value of those things are on the whole, you know, on the whole offense. I mean, what that does for offensive linemen and pass protection is paramount. It gives you another tool in your tool belt to go out there and upkick guys and take the line of scrimmage to defensive linemen and all those things. And if you don't have a back that's willing to do that stuff, you can't complement your passing game off of that. So I'm 100% with you on the get me a nasty 2, 3, 4, and good things will eventually happen to you. But that's why it's always interesting to me. The real speed backs, most really fast speed backs that have success in college, don't transition well or translate well to the National Football League because you don't have a wide side of the field and you're not outrunning the defense. And so those guys usually are failures in the league. And we had a few of those guys that came through Denver, a few of those guys that came through Washington when I was there, and none of those guys ever made it. Our running backs were 4.65 guys. They weren't burners, but they knew how to get downhill and create big runs. And anytime they did get in open space, they didn't get caught.
Hey, one of the second most popular name, and when it comes to do they stay, do they go, is DK Metcalf. He's entering the final year of his deal. Is he a guy you look at and say you need him in order to, first of all, have a unique threat? There are not many receivers built like him that can run the way he can, but he also is a guy who opens up things for everybody else on the field that's out there to catch the ball. So is that enough to justify, I don't know, 30, 35 million, whatever that number is going to be for a premier receiver?
Is he a premier receiver?
I think he's going to be paid like it.
Is he a premier talent? Is he a premier receiver? Like, I have a real issue with the overvaluing of wide receivers in this league. And I think like with 7-on-7 and all the different things that kids grow up playing right now, like there are so many receivers out there, in the draft and all over the place, and guys come in and have instant success. I just think we overvalue the position and overpay the position. So, like, do I think DK Metcalf is – like, when I talk about the top 10 guys in the league or top, 12 guys in the league that really threaten the defense, does DK become one of those guys that you talk about? Do you talk about him with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and, and on and on? Is he in that level? Because I would say probably not. He's a big body. He can really run. But is he that threatening of a guy that, your knees shake when you think about DK Metcalf? I don't know that he's that guy. I think this league is interesting because I think we overvalue and overpay those guys. They're the most dependent players on a football field. Everybody else has to do their job for those guys to have an impact. And if you don't want them to have an impact, you can double team those guys all day long, and you can limit, the opportunities those guys get. So I just, again, I think he's a great player. He's a great dude. I like DK Metcalf. Would I pay him $35 million? Is that the going rate? No, I don't nope. No, thanks.
Interesting. Hey, Mark, we had a firing here, obviously, with Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, and Mike McDonald said he's not going to use anybody that's been here that to replace him. What did you think about that move, and what did you see from the Seahawk offense that I don't know if you liked it or not. Did you?
No. Well, I think that what I've found with most college coaches that come to the NFL, and I don't know his background, so maybe he was in the NFL. I really don't know him, but a lot of like college coaches that have come in and that I talk to, the game is so different with the hash marks and the run game. And one of the guys that I spent a lot of time talking to is Cliff Kingsbury. And Cliff is really good at basically being honest and saying, man, I didn't know the run game and I didn't value the run game the way I needed to value it and the way I needed to know it. And how different it is, and how different the game is kind of in the college game outside the hashes. In the NFL game, it's about playing inside the hashes. And, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think it's a tough – man, I just think it's a really tough transition. I think it's really hard, to figure that out. And so anyhow, I understand the move. I understand, getting rid of him. And I think that's a big issue with the Seahawks offense when it comes to protection, when it comes to the run game and how you value that and how you hold on to that. I just think those are the things that probably failed their offense this year.
Is there just a general lack of patience these days as compared to years past? I mean, we're seeing it today. Obviously, Ryan Grubb, he got one year, and that's it. Maybe it was totally justified and for good reason. But you see, Gerard Mayo is out. You see Antonio Pierce is out, both out after 1 year. And especially in those situations, I'm looking at both those teams going, well, what did they think they were built to be a postseason team? Gardner Minshew was a starter for the Raiders, and you had Aiden O'Connell, and did you really think that was a playoff team? Or I'm curious why the impatience with first-time head coaches, young head coaches out there, especially in situations where, if you're being realistic, they weren't looking at playoffs.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're being realistic. I think you're 100% right. I think the other thing is you see a guy like Dan Quinn turn a program around in a heartbeat. You see a guy like Jim Harbaugh come and turn around a program in a heartbeat. And I would say, to those teams, that all, hire young guys and think that young guys connect better, or young guys relate better, or young guys communicate better. It's such a bunch of baloney. People are so stupid. Owners are just so dumb when it comes to that. You can either communicate with a guy or you can't. You either can command a room or you can't. It doesn't matter if you're 55 or if you're 25. If you have the ability to do that, then why not? Look at Sean McVay from day one. He's too young. Really? Well, all those teams that thought, hey, he's 3 or 4 years away from being able to do that because he's so young. How's that working out right now? like he's been outstanding. So you can either communicate or you can't, and you're either authentic or you're not. And so the age thing blows me away. The age thing has nothing to do with it. Like the fact that everybody's like, I want a young, dynamic offensive coordinator to take over my head coaching job. You know, I just think that that's such a short-sighted way of thinking about who's going to be my next coach. I mean, you have to have a dude that can stand in front of a room and command that room regardless of his age, and that people understand that dude is authentic, he's real. One thing about players, and I'm guilty, man. I'm a general studies major from the University of Idaho. I ain't smart. I guarantee I'm not the smartest guy, but I got good horse sense, and I can tell when a guy's full of baloney or when a guy's authentic and a guy's real. And I think players, for the most part, have that sense about them. And and when a guy just comes in there and it is, just isn't real or, is trying to be the coach that he grew up, like the Belichick assistant that all of a sudden is going to come in there and talk about the Patriot way. And like, as soon as you start doing that, players just tune you out. They're like, oh gosh, this guy. So like, I just think we get too enamored with youth and with offensive side of the ball and, genius. And I mean, one thing I will tell you is 100% true, whether you're a player or a coach, that football and genius are mutually exclusive events. So when anybody tells you the guy's an offensive genius or a defensive genius, walk away because he's not.
I like it. Hey, what do you think when you look at the playoffs? Is it just going to be the Chiefs and the Detroit Lions with the two best records, or is there somebody that you really like going into the playoffs that's playing particularly well?
Yeah, I mean, like Detroit really showed well the other night, beating Minnesota. So that was, a big-time performance by those guys. I thought Detroit was the best team in the NFC all year until they started getting so beat up with the injury stuff. I think Philadelphia is, exceptionally talented. And it depends on Jalen Hurts. He's been out for 2 weeks now. He's not clear concussion protocol as of yet, the last time I checked, which was this morning. So, like, that one scares me a little bit. I really like Detroit. But, the injuries scare me a little bit as well. But I think they are the class right now of the NFC. Their offense is so good. And they understand how to beat you up on the line of scrimmage. They're both their ability to beat you up in the run game and dominate with big plays in the run game. So I really like them, and I really like Philly. And then in the AFC, it's right now, I know that Lamar it's a small sample size, like 6 games, but he hasn't played well in the playoffs. He's 2-4 or 2-5 or something like that, and really hasn't played well. But you look at the way Baltimore's playing right now, they've really fixed a lot of the defensive issues they had earlier. A lot of people point to them moving Kyle Hamilton back to more like free safety as opposed to having him around the box all the time, even though he's really good at that stuff, has really helped solidify their defense. And the fact that I really feel like they know who they are identity-wise. Like, they're going to run the football. They're going to give it to, Derrick Henry. They're going to use the quarterback run game. And they're not going to drop back 35 times a game. They're just not going to do it. And so I really feel like Baltimore's probably playing the best football right now going into this playoffs in the AFC.
Is Lamar the MVP? Or is it, for some reason, Josh Allen is the guy that is between those two? I'm not sure why Joe Burrow is not in that conversation. I know they're not a playoff team, and maybe that's it, but his numbers are better than the other two, if you want to look at completion percentage and touchdowns, and especially compared to Josh Allen.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say, hey, Lamar's the MVP, but the game plan is give it to Derrick Henry 25 times a game and limit Lamar's, passing opportunities. I understand his numbers are outrageous, but it really, it's counterintuitive to me. Like, that guy's the MVP as long as he hands it to the running back a bunch. That feels like the running back's the MVP.
Yeah.
I think that Josh Allen, for me, was the narrative coming into this season was they're going to take a huge step back because they got rid of all their weapons. And this goes back to, where we started with DK Metcalf. oh, what are they going to do without Stephon Diggs? And, what are they going to do without Gabe Davis? And they just got a bunch of also-rans playing wide receiver. Well, guess what? They're pretty damn good, right?
Yeah, 13 wins.
Less weapons. And, you got rid of some of your big-time names, and yet your quarterback has responded with a bunch of touchdowns, really orchestrating well and not turning the ball over. Like, that to me is an MVP-type performance based upon the fact that you don't have any other, and I know name values doesn't win you anything, but the name value coming into this thing was non-existent. And, the real name is Josh, and what he's done I think is pretty incredible. So I would probably go in that direction if I was voting. I really wanted it to be Saquon. I wanted him to set the record of, break Eric Dickerson's record that was set in 1984 of 2105 and then give it to Saquon. But they decided to sit him, and he didn't get to reach that, which was really, I don't know about you guys, but that disappointed me. I'd like to see him play.
Yeah, I understood it, but yeah, it was a bummer. I wanted to see them break the record, especially since Eric made it clear he didn't want his record broken. So
yeah, all right.
I would have enjoyed that. He is Mark Schlereth with us each and every week during the football season. Always fantastic stuff, Mark. We appreciate it. The last time we'll say it, Happy New Year to you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good, guys. Take care.
Thanks, buddy.
There you go. Mark Schlereth, if you didn't catch